So here's where we bring science into this, specifically genetics. A lot of people like to bring up how Daenerys is just full-on Targaryen. I mean, she's got the silver hair, the purple eyes, so it makes a lot more sense that she would be the product of, two Targaryen incest going at it, rather than one Targaryen and a Stark. The other argument they like to bring up along those lines is how Arya looks a lot like Lyanna, and Jon looks a lot like Arya. So therefore, Jon must look a lot like Lyanna. Therefore, Jon must be Lyanna's son. Well, I just said that Arya looks like Lyanna. Probably acts a lot like her too, from what we've read. So do you think Arya is Lyanna's daughter? Now remember, under the theory of B plus A equals J, Jon is still the nephew of Lyanna, as is Arya. Or, Arya's the niece and Jon's the nephew, but you get what I mean. So they have the same relationship with her, so it seems though it's very possible for them to both kind of look a lot like her, without being directly related to her. Now, what I like to bring up is something that Tyrion says. Tyrion looks at Jon and he says to him, you look a lot more of the North than any of your siblings do. Now, he looks more of the North than Robb and Sansa and Bran and Rickon. Probably not so much Arya, but he looks more of the North than any of Ned's kids. So now I guess you could just make the argument, well, he inherited everything from Lyanna. But you see, that kind of indicates to me that he doesn't have any Targaryen-looking features about him. Now, if you want to think about it, who's really more likely to have a child that looks more of the North than the Stark children? A Stark and a Targaryen? Or maybe a Stark and a dark-haired Dornish woman? So here's the part where we talk a little bit about the show Game of Thrones. Now, as a lot of people like to bring up to me in the comments and all that stuff about my R plus L equals D videos, they like to mention how Dan and Dave, they've sort of already confirmed that Jon is, actually the child of Rhaegar and Lyanna. Well, I mean, I've seen those interviews where they talk about that, and I've also read things where they talk about that. And how it really went down was that George R.R. Martin, he asked them, well, who do you think is, Jon Snow's mother? And according to them, they answered him, and they didn't tell what his answer was, but they said that Martin just kind of didn't confirm whether they were right or not, but he just sort of smiled. Now, I guess from the way they take it, that means they got it right. Now, of course, again, they didn't say who they indicated. More than likely, they said, oh, it must be, Rhaegar and Lyanna, because that's what most people say. I mean, they might have said, oh, it must be Ashara Dayne, because that is somewhat popular theory too, and it is kind of mentioned in the first book. Again, refer to the videos below. But anyway, now you could interpret a smile one of two ways. One, he was happy because, hey, they got it right. Or two, he was just sinisterly laughing. Oh, you think you know, but you don't. And he wants them to kind of think it off. Now, people like to make the argument, well, if they hadn't got it right, George R.R. Martin never would have allowed them to, produce this show in the first place. Well, see, I hate to burst everybody's bubble, but you see, when they take somebody's work and make it into a TV show or a movie, the author doesn't really get all that much say in how it goes down and all that stuff. I mean, yes, it does depend, it does vary depending on how well this story is already sold and how famous the author is. And I'm sure George R.R. Martin got more, say in the matter than most authors do. But still, I mean, I really don't think he could have said, oh, no, sorry, you can't do this. Unless, of course, the publishers, told him, they can't do this. But that's a story for a different time. But since we're on the subject, let's talk about what the producers of Game of Thrones know. Let me refer you to this scene. Now in this scene, Daario, he gathers up some flowers and gives them to Daenerys under the excuse of, well, you have to get to know the land and the culture in order to know the people if you want to rule over them. And yeah, he's just doing this as an excuse to give her flowers and try to woo her and all that stuff. And even she sees through that. But let's put his motives aside for right now. Now, the first flower that he gives her is a blue winter rose. Now, yes, I know it's called something different in that land. I mean, it's some flower that the locals use to make tea and all that stuff. But let's be honest, it's a blue winter rose. Now, as we all know, blue winter roses are Lyanna's favorite, and they are pretty much like her symbol. I mean, whenever you see blue winter roses, you know it's some sort of reference to Lyanna. Now, another thing you have to realize is that blue winter roses, they don't exist in our world, at least as far as I know. So that definitely had to have been a prop, and it's not something that they just went down to the local flower shop and got. So, I mean, that choice was deliberate. So you got to think, now why would they deliberately choose to present Daenerys with a blue winter rose? And speaking of blue winter roses appearing in front of Daenerys, now we come to everybody's favorite argument, her visions at the House of the Undying. During her visions at the House of the Undying, Dany sees a blue winter rose encased in a block of ice. Now, the R plus L equals J theorists, they love this. They count it as definitive proof. You see, they believe that the block of ice represents the wall, and the blue winter rose represents an aspect of Lyanna. So they think an aspect of Lyanna is at the wall. And who's at the wall? Of course. So then they just jump up for joy and they think, yay, we've proved it, we've solved it. Yes, Jon is at the wall. So, and Lyanna, an aspect of Lyanna is at the wall, and Jon's there, so Jon's Lyanna's son. Yay! But now, why is it nobody ever stops and thinks, why exactly is Daenerys having a vision about Jon? Now, most of what Daenerys sees are, have to do about, very bad things that could happen to her in the future. I mean, she does see a vision of a man who could be her son in the future. We know that's not going to happen. But then we see, her being surrounded by a bunch of corpses and they're clawing at her or anything desperate. Now, there's different ways you can interpret that. You can interpret it as the zombies coming after her, or you can interpret it as, people that she's leading away from Marine, dying, during the plague and all that stuff. But basically, everything that she sees is bad stuff. She sees something that could be Victorian coming after her. But then after all this stuff, I mean, now she has something that's pointing to Jon. I mean, think about how out of left field this is. 3 betrayals you will know. 3 fires you must light. 3 mounts you must ride. Oh, by the way, you've got a nephew over at the wall. Now see, why couldn't that blue winter rose in a block of ice be a clue as to who her own mother is? I mean, if Lyanna is Daenerys' mother, she is the aspect of ice, and Rhaegar being the aspect of fire. And, again, she does see Rhaegar in her vision. And not just once, but she actually sees him twice. Now, of course, the first time she sees Rhaegar, she sees him playing his little harp there. And, and his wife Ilya is there with him. And she goes, make him a song. Oh, he has a song. His is the Song of Ice and Fire. Only there must be a third. The dragon has 3 heads. And then Rhaegar looks up and he looks directly at Daenerys and says nothing. Now, I've stated in a previous video that I think the 3 heads of the dragon refers to Rhaegar's 3 children. Rhaegar knew he was meant to have 3 children, and I think that's the 3 heads of the dragons. Now, everybody likes to just say, well, the 3 heads of the dragons, that's the 3 people who are going to ride the dragons to, and no, I don't think that's what the 3 heads of the dragons is talking about. I mean, yes, the 3 heads of the dragon is on the Targaryen sigil, and it goes all the way back to Aegon and his 2 sisters, but I really don't think that's strictly talking about 3 dragon riders. I think the 3 dragons, the 3 heads of the dragon, is referring to Rhaegar's 3 children. Okay, so let me read you a little passage from the House of the Undying, from A Clash of Kings, right here. And what was it? Okay, see, burn. Okay. Rubies flew like drops of blood from the chest of a dying prince as he sank to his knees in the water, and with his last breath murmuring a woman's name, Mother of Dragons, Daughter of Death. Now, of course, this is referring to Rhaegar getting killed by Robert at the Trident. And, apparently the big story is that, Rhaegar murmured, Lyanna's name when, he lay dying in the river. But, in that passage, Dany sees, Rhaegar getting killed, the rubies flying off into the river, and the prince, slouching over there. But then she hears Mother of Dragons, Daughter of Death, right after, Rhaegar utters the woman's name. So, we never really knew what it was that Rhaegar muttered, at the Trident, but everybody assumes it was Lyanna because that's who he captured, that's who he loved, apparently. But maybe it's possible, it's possible that he actually called out Mother of Dragons, Daughter of Death, because he knew the prophecy, and he knew that he was going to have a daughter. So that's two visions that Dany has about Rhaegar during her time at the House of the Undying. And if you notice throughout the books, Dany talks to other people about Rhaegar a lot. She talks to Barristan Selmy about it and Jorah Mormont about it. And really only once she talks to Barristan Selmy about King Aerys. She asks him once, well, what was he like? And predictably, he just goes, which is pretty much what most people would do in that situation. But you got to ask yourself, why is Martin always having Dany bring up Rhaegar for some reason? And so those are my reasons why I think Daenerys is actually the child of Rhaegar and Lyanna instead of Jon Snow. So now, assuming I'm right, and I think I am, I could still be wrong, but let's just assume for a moment that I'm right. What exactly does this mean for Jon? Okay, look, no matter what, Jon is an extremely important character in this story. He and Dany pretty much are the parallel characters, Jon being ice and Dany being fire. Now, and I do believe that they both have a very big role to play in the final endgame against the White Walkers or whoever the big bad happens to actually be. Now, one thing I'd like to bring up in the Azor Ahai myth, a part of the Azor Ahai myth is that he will be wielding, a sword called Lightbringer. Well, now Dany isn't exactly skilled with a sword. Some people think that her dragons are her sword. Now, I personally still think that she is Azor Ahai. So how exactly is she to wield a sword called Lightbringer? Now, this goes back to my belief that Quaithe is actually Ashara Dane. Now, the Danes, her house has a very interesting history. One of the most interesting things about them, though, is their family sword. Now, unlike, all the other big houses in Westeros, they don't have a Valyrian steel sword. But they do have something quite unique. The Dane family sword is actually a sword that was forged from metal from a meteorite that actually crashed to the ground during a meteor storm. And hence, a falling star. Hence, that's why, the Dane family sigil is a star. Now, this sword, not only is it the only one like it in the world, but, it's called Dawn. And the reason why, probably the reason why it's called Dawn is because it actually glows white. It's described in the books as glowing a milky white, so it radiates light. It literally is a light bringer. So here's my theory on what's going to happen. Quaithe is going to reveal herself to be Ashara Dane, and she's going to give Dany, Dawn, the family sword. Now, as you remember, the last person who wielded the sword was Sir Arthur Dane. Now, whoever in the Dane family gets to wield Dawn, he's referred to as the Sword in the Morning. So that's why Arthur was referred to as the Sword in the Morning. But anyway, so Ned returns, Dawn, to Ashara. So Ashara has the sword. So what I think is going to happen is Quaithe is going to reveal herself to be Ashara. She's going to give the Dane family sword to Dany before Dany heads back over to Westeros. Dany's going to head back over to Westeros, and she's going to fly in our dragons wielding this sword that brings light. And they'll refer to it as Lightbringer, although it's going to be Dawn, but whatever. But anyway, Dany, she's not exactly really good with a sword. So what I think is going to happen is Dany is going to, at this point, she'll know who Jon is, being Ashara Dane's son, and she's going to hand Jon the sword and just say, "This belongs to you now." And so then Jon is going to use the Dane family sword because he is the son of Ashara Dane. And he's, definitely worthy of carrying a sword like that. And then I guess if he still has a long call, maybe he'll give it to Jorah Mormont. I don't know. But the point is, Dany will be originally the one who's seen with the sword of Lightbringer. And then she'll give it to Jon. Now, also, I'd like you to remember, hey, look, I like Jon too. I mean, he's one of my favorites. He's number 3 beneath Daenerys and Tyrion. And then number 3 is Jon, okay? And then everybody else. So, I mean, I get why everybody's emotionally invested in Jon. I mean, personally, I think one of the things that people like Jon about so much is the whole thing with Ygritte, and I just wanted to kiss you there, and yet she still says he knows nothing, which that part I don't get. But anyway, my point is, it's just, I understand everybody's really emotionally invested in Jon, and they would love him to be the prince who was promised, and they'd love the whole story to just revolve around him. But he is a very big part of it, but it doesn't all revolve around him. It also revolves around Dany and Tyrion and Arya and Sansa and maybe Jaime too. And, Cersei, it does revolve around her to a point, though I don't really think she's going to matter in the end, but still. But, I mean, anyway, Jon is a very big part of it, but he's not the only thing. So that is my video on R plus L equals D. I hope you enjoyed that. Hope you're not too mad at me. I'm not going to apologize, but at least I hope you're not too offended. Anyway, as always, leave your comments, and I'm sure there's going to be plenty of comments on this one. And as always, pertinent contact information down below in the abyss. Please comment, rate, subscribe. You know the drill. And until next time, this is Isaac Sanderson telling everybody, make your lives grand and have a good day. Thank you very much. R plus L equals D.